Welcome back to another episode of Opal Wave MTG, a channel dedicated to exploring power levels in EDH and helping you tune your deck to your meta. I'm your host Jacob, and today we're going to be looking at Isshin, Two Heavens is One. He is a Mardu-aligned creature with, if a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. And for all three of the power levels that I'm presenting today, I decided to go with a mid-range aggro approach since Isshin plays into it so well. I also thought about doing maybe a group slug kind of thing. Let me know what you did with your version of Isshin. As usual, the deck lists are in the description below. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. For the Skirmish version of Isshin, I decided to go with a go wide strategy. There's a lot of really cool creatures like Hero Bladehold, Leon and War Leader, and Adeline that all make creatures when they attack, and then Isshin will double those attack triggers, so we get even more tokens. And then we use those tokens to trigger stuff like Hellrider, so we can deal a ton of damage to our opponents. Stuff like Cavalcade Calamity and Raid Bombardment as well go really great with our strategy. We've also got a few kind of standalone creatures that can provide us some value, like Tectonic Giant. Captain Landry Storm is cool for ramping. Treasury Thrall can really just start picking up everything from your graveyard to get back into the game if it's been a long and grindy one. Bomat Courier, really interesting form of card draw on this creature. Need 3 or 4 swings and you've got yourself an entire new hand basically. Atali is just super strong in a deck like this. I mean, Atali is pretty strong in general, but when you get to double the attack trigger, he can definitely get out of hand very quickly. For the sorceries, we've got the new card Soul Transfer from Kamigawa, where we can either exile target creature or planeswalker, or we can return creature or planeswalker from our graveyard to your hand. We have a decent amount of artifacts and enchantments, so triggering the both claws won't be too hard. Martial Coup, great board wipe, and also just gives us a bunch of creatures that we can then start attacking with and getting those triggers that we want. Feed the Swarm and Blasphemous Act are pretty decent removal spells. Then we've got Disenchant, Mardu Charm, Forsake the Worldly, just more removal. Some ways to kind of protect our board, like Chroma's Will and Unbreakable Formation. Plunder Forbidden is really sweet. So you draw a card and you lose life, and you can copy the spell for each creature that you sacrifice as you cast the spell. So since we're going to be making a bunch of creatures with our attack triggers, this card will generally draw us a bunch of cards, and it's at instant speed. So if someone does a board wipe or something, we can just use those creatures to draw a bunch of new cards anyways. The artifacts are primarily ramp, with a few equipment that we can abuse with Isshin, mainly Moon Silver Spear, Seraphic Greatsword. They both make 4/4s when we attack. Argentum Armor destroys a permanent when we attack, and Sword of the Animist finds us a basic land whenever we attack. All pretty sweet equipment in the context of this deck. Moving on to the enchantments, like I was talking about earlier, we've got Cavalcade of Calamity and Raid Bombardment, so whenever we attack with our little dudes, we can deal extra damage to our opponents. Campaign of Vengeance basically does the same thing, but we're draining instead of just straight up damage. Mardu Ascendancy and Fable of the Mirror Breaker, both really sweet enchantments. Mardu Ascendancy is going to make us a bunch of 1/1 goblins that we can just use for our Cavalcade of Calamity and Raid Bombardment triggers. Fable of the Mirror Breaker makes us a 2/2 red goblin shaman that makes a treasure whenever we attack, so extra treasure whenever we're attacking is pretty sweet. Assemble the Legion as a kind of an inevitable win con. It starts off really slow, but once you get a couple of counters on it, it's just going to start providing an overwhelming board state. Really nice card. Then we've got Hissing Miasma, Marchesa's Decree, and Blood Reckoning to deter our opponents from attacking us, because these cards will force them to lose life. In the lands, we've got Guild Gates, as well as a few other enter the battlefield tap lands to really help us hit our colors. Castle Ardenvale can make 1/1 humans for us. Vault of the Archangel is super strong since we are a token-based deck and going wide. Pay 4 and tap it. Creatures you control gain Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. Makes blockers almost impossible for our opponents and gains us a bit of extra life, especially if we have like Hellrider out, because his trigger will gain you life as well. Pretty sweet. Then we've also got Heinware battlements to pair with the Heinware garrison, so we can meld that into the Writhing Township. Moving on to the battle version of Isshin, you'll see that the quality in our creatures is a lot higher than in the other deck. A lot of creatures that when they land, they're just going to start doing a lot of damage on their own, not really needing to build up a board. Stuff like Drakuseth, Inferno Titan, Grave Titan, Tali is also in the other deck, but just a really strong card overall. A few ways to generate extra combat steps like Aurelia, Godo, Scourge of the Throne. Unfortunately, Combat Celebrant will not trigger with Isshin because it's not an attack trigger. It's just something that you may do as it attacks. It's not a when you attack trigger. And the sorceries, we've got Armageddon and Catastrophe. These are win conditions. Once you get a big creature or a few big creatures or just even a decent board state, sweeping the rug out from underneath your opponents so that they can't further advance their board states is going to lock that game in for you. So definitely view these cards as win conditions and not necessarily just casting them willy-nilly and seeing what happens. We do have a lot of ways that we can break parity on this, even if we don't have a big beater to help us finish the game. Stuff like Sun Titan, Captain Lannery Storm can generate treasures for us. We've got Smothering Tithe that can also generate treasures since our opponents won't be able to pay for their draw triggers. And we've also got Cosmic Intervention, Teferi's Protection, and a Boros Charm, so we can basically negate the effect of the destruction on our own lands. Then we've got Blasphemous Act. Again, this card is just a fantastic board wipe. Grim Tutor, Easy Tutor. J-Will, really strong card, can help us power out some of our bigger creatures early on, like a Goldspan Dragon, Inferno Titan. All that stuff is really strong. And then we've got Relentless Assault and World at War to get some extra attack triggers. We really want to attack, so more attack triggers equals more better. In our instance, we've just increased the quality of our removal overall, stuff like Anguished Unmaking, Bedevil. Again, we've got the protection spells, so they're also good just at protecting our own board, but when you used in tandem with Catastrophe or Armageddon, it's really just going to blow out your opponents. Thrill of Possibility, just some extra card draw, as well as Cathartic Pyre has the utility of dealing 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker, or discarding 2 cards to draw 2 cards. We do have some reanimate effects in the deck, so using those to pitch some of our big guys early can be pretty useful. We've increased the quality of the ramp in our artifacts, and we have consolidated the equipment down to just 2, with Sword of the Animist and Helm of the Host. So with Helm of the Host, this is going to be a combo piece with either Combat Celebrant, Godo, or Aurelia. So essentially, once you equip it to one of these 3 creatures, you move to combat, you make a copy of it, you swing with that copy, and you trigger, and you get an extra combat. And then at the beginning of that combat, the Helm of the Host is going to trigger again and make another copy of that creature, and you can do that over and over and over again until your opponents are dead. And the enchantments, Aggravated Assault, fantastic for letting us get some extra combat steps in. Animate Dead and Necromancy, again, we can reanimate some of the important stuff. Hissing Miasma is the most efficient version of those effects from previous, where when a creature attacks us, they lose 1 life. Reconnaissance is a really sweet way for us to get attack triggers and then just remove that creature from combat before our opponents have a chance to block them and kill them. Smothering Tithe, a really sweet way for us to break parity once we've destroyed all lands, and it's also just a pretty decent ramp spell in general. And Sunbird's Invocation, I love this card a bunch. It generates a ton of value if no one responds to it or no one deals with it. As usual, when we move up in power levels, the amount of lands we have entering tapped regardless decreases, and we've added in some other lands that can enter untapped if we really need them to. Just better quality overall in the lands. Before moving on to the glory version of Isshin, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who has subscribed or liked or commented on any of the stuff that I've been making recently. It means a lot to me, and I really appreciate it. If you like this content and you feel like you've gotten something out of it, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment letting me know what commander you'd like to see me brew next, or if you have any sweet brews that you came up with your own, share those as well. And moving on to the glory version of Isshin, we've basically got a Mardu stack that leverages combat to gain card advantage, much like the Tymna X decks that you see running around in the format. We actually have Tymna in here because she's just a really strong card, really great for generating card advantage. Robber of the Rich, really cool trigger that we can get with Isshin. Captain Landry Storm we still got in here, and Kroxa is another sweet card that has an attack trigger that can be pretty devastating. Then we've just got a bunch of stacks pieces, and our main win condition is going to be Kiki plus Felder Guardian. And we've also got Karmic Guide, and that's because of Buried Alive. So if we Buried Alive, Karmic Guide, Felder Guardian, and Kiki Jiki, we can get them all out and win the game with one reanimation spell. So we reanimate the Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide ETB, it doesn't matter if you target the Felder Guardian or the Kiki Jiki first, because the Kiki Jiki will enter, you tap it, make a copy of Karmic Guide. The copy enters and reanimates Felder Guardian. Felder Guardian enters and then targets Kiki Jiki, and then you flicker Kiki, and then from there you can make infinite Felder Guardians. If you target the Felder Guardian first, you just flicker the Karmic Guide, and then the Karmic Guide ETB reanimates the Kiki Jiki, and then from there you start making the infinite Felder Guardians. The sorceries are pretty straightforward. We've got the Buried Alive to set up our combo, a few tutors, and the reanimation spell. Then in our instance, we have upgraded our instance pretty heavily here. Some really strong targeted removal. Fire Covenant is really great for just clearing the board if we need to. Added Vampiric Tutor, extra tutors, really great. And a Dark Ritual. Never hurts to have that turn 1 opposition agent. With our artifacts, we've just upgraded our artifacts to the best possible options that we can get. We've added a Wishclaw Talisman, it's a really great card for tutoring. Smuggler's Copter, an interesting card that can generate some card advantage for us. When it attacks, you draw a card and then discard a card. And then we've got the Knowledge Pool, so we can lock out our opponents with either a Rule of Law type of effect or the Train with Magistrate. So once we have a board set up, we can just start beating face like that. Some pretty decent enchantments in here. Animate Dead and Necromancy again are in here. Then we've got the Deafening Silence to help slow the Turbo Nos players down. We've got the Rule of Law, since we just want as many of these effects as possible, and a Necropotence. We'll use Necropotence pretty sparingly here, but it's a decent way to keep our hand filled in those kind of grindier situations where we really can't get card advantage going on. And finally, the lands. So the lands, we've got the best lands that we can throw in here. We've got a couple of basics. Non-mountain basics, so we can play around the Magus of the Moon if we do happen to drop that. But yeah, outside of that, all of our lands are entering untapped, and they're producing multiple colors for us. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Opal Wave MTG. I'm your host Jacob, and until next time.